Good morning, guys, and welcome to Racist Confessions. It's, and seeing this is probably racist too. Um, I wonder if anyone like Steve Harvey has ever done an episode like this where people admit that they're racist. It's been a pretty ugly week in America, and I was watching that video that probably everyone has seen by now of the white guy in the polo shirt and Trump cap, who quickly stripped off his clothes when he realized he was being chased by, I don't know if it was the Antifa or whoever was not approving of him. And there was a guy filming him. It's going to be in a documentary. And they're like, "What? Why did you take the clothes off? Like, aren't you a racist?" And he goes, "Barely." Yeah. Well, Mrs. Chester, is she barely racist? Because one thing about racists, myself included, is that we don't recognize what we are. We don't. I'm sure that I have at least one offspring who could point out examples of my racism, and I'm going to give you a quick 2-minute encapsulation of how I grew up, and then a couple of racist confessions. Two things which I hadn't even thought about since they happened until yesterday when I was driving to work and remembering things I've done that I find myself kind of horrified by now. So I grew up in Freeport, which was the scene of a lot of racial tension in the 1960s. I was in the white part, not the Jewish white part, but in the working class Irish and Italian and other white part. We literally only had 2 black people in our elementary school, and I can tell you their names. The girl was Anna, and the boy was Ellis. And I remember Ellis as being sort of a clown. Maybe that was protection, I don't know. And Anna was just like us. And again, when I went into the high school, I was mainstreamed with the smart Jewish kids, so I really didn't see any people of color. But we did have two girls who were also in that intellectual, in the advanced classes, Cindy and Vanessa. And I know they had a lot of flack for being with the white group. Cindy actually went to my church. I grew up Lutheran, if that means anything. Anyway, it will mean something, I'm sure. Not anti-Semitic, my family, though my mother was known to describe certain people as Jewish but nice. With us, my mother, my father never said 2 words against anyone, but I remember my mother despising the Irish parents. We actually had fathers that fought drunkenly in the street on occasion. So whereas we call lower class, lower status white people trailer trash, I grew up with the term Irish trash, which I carried with me even here, because I remember using it to describe people in this neighborhood that I didn't like. And as for black people, like I said, no, really very, very little contact with black people. My mother, who grew up overseas and came here as an immigrant, really despised Latino people. She could not stand hearing people speak Spanish in stores. And she would call them, I don't know what she called them, it was something in Polish, I guess. And she was also horrified by mixed race children who of course, began to appear as things, as racism fell away and more mixed race children were being seen out here in Nassau, Suffolk counties on Long Island. I want to tell you about two totally racist things that I confess I have never told anyone. All witnesses are now dead. When I was about 10 or 11, we had a Halloween party at my house. And it was for the Girl Guards. The Girl Guards were the Salvation Army equivalent to the Girl Scouts. And they were in like the older and the younger groups. The older groups were going to a party, and we decided to host the younger group at my house. And I wore blackface. I had a black and white 50s style kind of house dress. I remember it to this day. And a plastic wig. I don't know where we got this thing. It was a plastic white wig. I go, what am I going to do? And my father showed me how to burn cork. And I blackfaced. And I thought this was hilarious. And I called myself Aunt Jemima's grandmother. And this was not in the 50s. This was in the 60s, because I remember one of the girls went as Barbara Eden, My Dreamy Jeannie. This was during those times. Slightly before the race riots, but definitely what I would call current times. And I had blackface. And I remember doing the blackface again to go trick-or-treating, and nobody in my white neighborhood said a thing about it. And then I remember something that happened about 10 years after that. So this happened when I was 10 or 11. And then when I was about 20, 21, I was going to school in Jamaica. And I took the bus from Jamaica from and to Jamaica and Freeport, because it was cheaper than the train. I was going to school in Jamaica, and I made a date with a bus driver who happened to be black. And I did not let him pick me up at home. I had him meet me at the bus stop after his tour, and I had him drop me off a block from my house. I can't say we had much of a relationship. We basically spent that day looking around for pot, but I was ashamed to have my parents see me going out with a black person. Have other things happened since then? I'm sure I've done many things that I didn't think about twice, but these are two things that happened in my past that I thoroughly disavow now. Am I still barely racist? Well, maybe confessing your racism isn't exactly getting rid of it. You know what I did? I tried to find some cork to see if I could burn it. I find that corks nowadays have a waxy coating on them. This is a Baiting Hollow cork from out on the island, but I have a cheaper cork here, and I did it with a candle. You see how offensive this is already? Imagine teaching your child to do this. What you have to do, I'm not going to do it now, you have to keep reheating the cork, because you don't get a whole lot of charcoal. Now, does this make you think more or less of me? Remember back in that day, I didn't have jowls. Yeah, hilarious, right? But yet this was the standard for humor for many, many years. Still is, for those people who consider themselves barely racist. Not really coming out that well. You see now why I didn't get dressed, because this is going to be hard to take off. And there's not even that much on there. Well, now you know. Now you know. Probably people wouldn't see me as racist now, but barely. I barely am now, right?